everybody. Welcome to the Libertarian Party of Wake County meetup. I appreciate all of you showing up on a Wednesday. I know it's tough. Traffic and the heat, it's wearing everybody out. I get it. Hi, everybody. My name is Travis, chair of the Libertarian Party of Wake County, and we are here every week, so all are welcome. If you ever want to come hang out with us, we're usually on the other side, but we meet from 7 to 9 every Wednesday, so please come hang out. We talk about everything. Most of the time, we're not talking about politics, but I'm getting an echo. Welcome. If you ever want to come hang out with us, we're usually on the other side, but we meet from 7 to 9 every Wednesday, so please come hang out. Hold on one second. About everything. Most of the time, we're not talking about politics. Is that better? Do we have an echo? Oh, whoa, that's good. Technical difficulties fixed. So anyway, we really want to build bridges, not walls. And that is why this is a very diverse crowd, and I love it. We want to find things in common. We've got other parties here, other folks here that may not be libertarian, that may be curious about the party. But there's one thing that most of us have in common is we need election reform. We want a fairer way to vote. We want the voters to be heard. We want a true majority to be heard. And ranked choice voting does that. It eliminates the spoiler effect. It eliminates having to spend billions of dollars on a race that only pays 50 grand a year or less. It eliminates a lot of errors and questions in the electoral system by getting a true majority. And we want to build on these similarities and build these bridges so that we can have fairer, truer elections. And so tonight, I'm honored to have Better Ballot North Carolina with us to speak. We're going to have Vicki Ryder with us. We're also going to have someone from the Forward Party named Patrick Newton. And that is one thing we certainly have in common is ranked choice voting. Diane Silver is going to join us on Zoom from Asheville, North Carolina, which is fantastic. And we're going to throw in a little special treat for you. My friend Dr. Mark Barrett came all the way from Hickory, and he started his own medical practice. And most of us in the room probably support medical freedom, your right to choose what you put in your body, how you consume things and when you consume things. So he's going to talk about his practice and what he's seen. He has seen some things, so you want to stick around for that. And also there's a petition to get Forward Party on the ballot. So Patrick's going to have that. I encourage you to sign it, because anything we can do to disrupt the uniparty and disrupt the duopoly, I'm all in. We need to challenge the omnipotent state and the cult of the two-party system. So with that said, I'm going to bring up a very good friend of mine, John Underwood, and he's going to introduce our first guest to you. So give John a round of applause.
Thank you, Travis. I'm John Underwood. I am with Wake LP and I'm with Better Ballot North Carolina. I've been a supporter for ranked choice voting for several years now. Better Ballot got started along with Vicki. We're some of the people who started Better Ballot. So Vicki's going to speak to us tonight. She's going to give a nice, relatively short introduction to ranked choice voting to help people understand what it is, what it isn't, what it can do. She is, like I said, she's been with Better Ballot since the beginning. She is a strong proponent of ranked choice voting for over 20 years, long before Better Ballot got started, back when it was known as instant runoff voting. Same thing, just different name now. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Vicki, and she's going to give you a nice intro.
Good to see so many of you tonight. I really wasn't prepared for so many of you. I don't know how many are Zooming in too, but hello to you if you're out there. So yeah, as John mentioned, I have been a staunch supporter of a different way of voting ever since I first knew that there was such a thing as a choice in how we vote. And I think we all share one thing in common, and that is that we care enough to be here tonight to do something to change the way we have to vote currently. We all know that the system isn't working for many, many reasons, and there are many fixes that need to happen, but Better Ballot NC chose to focus on ranked choice voting as a simple upgrade to the way we vote that could make a huge difference in the outcomes, not just in the outcomes of elections, but in the outcomes of what our lives look like and how much control we have over them and who represents us in making major decisions. So I first heard about something called instant runoff voting many years ago, which was a former name of what we now call ranked choice voting. In some places they still use IRV. But it has been increasingly apparent, I think, to all of us that we have to do something. So we're here and we share that. I want to tell you a little bit about our organization, and if we could just turn to slide number 6, Brad. There we are. Okay. So we were founded back in July of 2020, not very long ago, and just before all hell broke loose with the pandemic. It was very hard to build an organization when you couldn't meet the people that you were working with, but we did it. We are a grassroots organization. We are all volunteers. We have no paid staff. We are a not-for-profit. We are certified by the state as a bona fide 501c3, which means that all donations are tax deductible if you pay taxes. And we have just one common goal within the organization, and that is to bring ranked choice voting to North Carolina. We know that there are many other fixes that need to be made. We know about gerrymandering. We know about voter suppression. We know about all kinds of things that go on to make it harder for us to get the kind of representation that we all deserve. But ranked choice voting for us is our focus. So I wanted to just explain to you how it works. And I know some of you sitting here don't really need that introduction. Could I just see those of you who feel that you really understand how it works and what happens to your vote when you put your ballot in the machine? Come on, Victor, you know. Yeah, so some of you do know what happens to your vote, but many of you don't, and so I just want to go through, I have about 15 minutes to talk about how ranked choice voting works and what a difference it can make. We call it a simple upgrade. We don't like to call it a change because we know some people are quite change averse and are afraid to think about voting in a different way. You mean, you know, they just think, well, we've always done it this way, and so that's the way it's supposed to be. But it really isn't. And there are lots of changes that can be made and are being made. And as you'll hear as I talk this evening, you'll learn that it's being used in many, many places already with great success and with people who, once they try it, can't imagine why we would ever vote any other way. So that's about all you need to know about our organization, other than that we're always welcome to having you come in and help us to make this upgrade possible. And we're going to talk a little bit more about how you can do that when I get through. But why we feel that ranked choice voting is the way to go is really simple. It's a way that you can truly vote for the person that you want to represent you and your ideals and your values in our legislative process. You can vote for them without being afraid that you're going to be a spoiler, or that you're going to waste your vote, or that your vote really doesn't matter. So the way that happens is, and let's see, you know, what I think I'm going to do, and I've got Brad helping me tonight, and that's great. Brad, if you want to go to, let's see, let's go to slide 16, because I want to show you a little video that will show what happens to your vote when you vote by ranked choice voting. Instead of voting for just one candidate, we won't start it, but it's there and it's ready for you. Okay, so instead of voting for just one candidate, you get to rank the candidates on the ballot in the order of your preference. You like this person first, and this other one, well, maybe second. They're okay, because there are some things that we have in common, and I could live with that one, but no way do I want to vote for that one. You don't have to rank all of them. With ranked choice voting, you can vote for one just the way you always do. If there's no other candidate who has anything that you think would be of value to you, you can just vote for one. But what happens when you do that, of course, is that you're then depriving yourself of the advantage of having a backup in case your favorite can't get the majority of the votes. Instead of having your vote just not count for anything, it would automatically go to your second choice. And if that person can't get the majority, and by majority, a true majority, we mean at least 50% of the vote, then there would be another round of voting. Everybody's vote is counted again, but your vote would again move to your next choice, and so on, until somebody emerges as a true 50% winner. The way it works now, of course, is that when you've got 5 people on a ballot, somebody could win with 20% of the vote. And that means, because they got the most, and everybody else got maybe 19%, maybe some got 5 or 6, but it all adds up to 100% of the votes, but it doesn't add up to anybody with a majority. And that's a problem. Because if you've got 5 people on the ballot and somebody can win with 20% of the vote, that means that 80% of the people did not want that person to represent them, and they're stuck with it. Okay? So, a big problem. Let's see, by looking at how these votes are tabulated, where your vote goes. And one thing I want to make clear is that we still adhere to the one person, one vote value, okay? Everybody gets to vote one time. It's just that your vote is going to have carry more weight and be a stronger vote because it stays in the race until the majority winner emerges. So let's see how that works. Dale, can you start that for us?
Pick your favorite color.
The ranked choice voting way.
Instead of voting for just one color, you get to rank your top 3.
Well, purple is the best, but if I can't have purple, I want blue. And if neither of those wins, I guess I can live with orange.
Now, pick your favorite color.
The ranked choice voting way.
Instead of voting for just one color, you get to rank your top 3.
Well, purple is the best, but if I can't have purple, I want blue. And if neither of those wins, I guess I can live with orange.
Now, let's count up everybody's votes.
Under ranked choice voting rules, it's not enough just to get the most votes. You need a majority.
More than 50% of the votes.
Purple's ahead, but it has only 7 votes.
It needs at least 11 to win.
So we eliminate the color in last place.
Sorry, Orange fans, we're going to your second choice.
2 more for green,
1 for purple.
but no color has 11 votes yet.
Still no majority.
Bye-bye,
blue.
1 more for purple,
4 for green.
and we have a winner.
The ranked choice voting way.
When you don't do it this way. In North Carolina, it only requires 30% of the vote for somebody to win a primary. So that means, again, 70% of the people didn't want that person as their candidate, so their vote doesn't count anymore. When it comes to the general elections, there is no threshold, which means that if you had 10 people on the ballot, somebody could win with maybe 11% of the vote. So this way, we make sure that everybody gets to vote for the person they really want. You don't have to hold your nose and vote for somebody that you think is strategically better to vote for because they have a better chance of winning. You can vote for the person you really want, which shows the party and shows the legislature what people are really thinking. But if that person can't make it, instead of having your vote wasted, it will go to your second choice. They have a second round. That's why they call it instant runoff voting. We do have a second round, and everybody's vote gets counted again, but this time, if you were one of those people who voted for the person who was eliminated, your vote would be counting for the second person. And then they have as many rounds as they need, but in every round, everybody gets just the same number of votes, one, until somebody wins, okay? So that does away with the argument that we're hearing that it's not fair because some people get to vote twice. No, it's just like any other runoff. Everybody gets to vote again. The benefit, of course, of ranked choice voting is that you don't have to go back to the polls to vote again. And statistics show that when we have runoff votings, half of the voters don't return. So that's a big gap in how people are represented. They don't return either because they don't think that there's anybody left to vote for, or because they just can't. They're working people. It's expensive to have to hire a babysitter and go back to the polls. And it's expensive for all of us. Do you remember in 2020 when Georgia had those 2 runoff elections for the Senate seats? Do you know what those 2 runoff elections cost? It was a combined total of over $400 million for just those 2 runoff elections. Yeah, I see your mouth is going, wow. That was money that the party had to pay to run another election. It was the taxpayers' cost to have to run another election and pay the poll workers and so on. And it was money spent from people who supported the candidates by having to support yet another campaign. So one of the other benefits that we like to talk about with ranked choice voting is that when it eliminates the need for runoffs, because they happen instantly, then it saves money, it saves time, and everybody's vote counts. With the runoffs the way we have now, just about 50% of the people never get their votes counted the second time. So that's another benefit. Okay, so this is, by the way, an example of what happens in single-seat elections, right? There's one winner. Ranked choice voting can also be used, and it's a little more complicated to explain when you've got 15 or 20 minutes, but when there are multi-seat elections, city council, for example, you basically vote the exact same way. So it's easy. It's always very easy to vote with ranked choice voting. You just click off my first choice, my second choice, my third choice, and so on. This example talked about voting for your top 3, and it's something that I need to mention. The kind of ranked choice voting that Better Ballot NC is promoting is without limitation on how many votes you can, or how many choices you have. Okay, so it's not a matter of voting for only the top 3, which, as you can see, might disadvantage smaller parties, and so on. You can vote for all people that you truly and sincerely would like to see sitting in that seat. But in some places, they have gone to top 5 or other kinds of variations, and we can get deeper into the weeds and those kinds of things in a while. But I think it's just important to know that in North Carolina, the way we vote now, without any threshold or any bar that has to be crossed, we have representatives sitting in the legislature who represent really a very small fraction of the voting public. That's a problem. Okay, so let's see. We can talk about another benefit, I think I've already mentioned it to you, is that it really allows you to vote sincerely. I know a lot of people who tell me that they hold their nose and they vote for somebody that they really wouldn't have chosen, but they don't feel they have a choice because they think the person they really like can't win. And there's no such thing with ranked choice voting. You vote for the person you really want, knowing that if that person doesn't make it, you have a backup. You are not finished, and your vote isn't thrown out. You know, I always say if I go into a store and I want some vanilla ice cream, if they don't have vanilla ice cream, they don't throw me out of the store. I get a choice to pick a different flavor if I want to. Well, it's the same thing here. Your vote will not get thrown away with ranked choice voting. So that's benefit number 2. There's no such thing as a wasted vote with ranked choice voting. Ranked choice, we know that you often feel your vote is wasted, and often it is. Often it is wasted because you have voted sincerely for the person you want, but that person didn't have a chance of winning. At least not yet. When we have everybody working on an even playing field, where they do have a choice of winning, where they do have a chance to be represented in the debates, and to have an equal footing financially, so that they can run campaigns that equal the campaigns of the richer parties, then things might change. And also, running those third-party people does not create another problem we see with the way we vote now, and that's the spoiler effect. You all know what I mean by the spoiler effect. Somebody who is on the ballot who seems to be taking votes away from somebody else just by merely running. And we saw that happen in the last Senate election here, where one of the major parties actually had to go to court because they tried to keep another party off the ballot, and it would have been to their advantage had we had ranked choice voting for that person to be on the ballot, because they would have received a lot of those second choice votes. But they threw it away. And we saw it happen in Alaska too. I know a lot of you were watching the Alaska elections and saw what happened with ranked choice voting. The opposite of scenario evolved. So that's that. And what it does, intentionally or not, is to reduce the rancor in our current election system, because any candidate who is smart enough to be running should know that instead of trying to vilify their opponent, they ought to be courting those people for their second choice votes. And they'd have a much better chance of winning. And that was what happened in Alaska, if you remember, when it was, I can say her name, Sarah Palin, it was encouraging her voters not to vote for anybody else. And so it ended up in a Democratic win, quite surprising for Alaska, but that happened. Had they had ranked choice voting, that would never have happened. And it works equally for both of the major parties, that when they can form alliances and say, you know, this person agrees with us on some of these issues, so let's get together and let's form an alliance, and you can encourage your people if they want to vote for you, that's fine, but to consider me as their second choice. And so the rancor really goes down. You don't have all of the negative polarization that has become so even violent in our current election scene. So a big advantage to a lot of people say, I don't even want to vote because it's too ugly, it's getting nasty out there, what's the point? Well, with ranked choice voting, there'd be a real point to cast your vote for the person you really want. We've already talked about the fact that it saves time and money, and that's a big one. So I want to talk about, you're clear on that, how it works? So it reduces wasted votes, it reduces the spoiler effect, it saves time and money, it allows you to vote for the person you really want, and it encourages more candidates to run. That's why we say that you have a greater choice, because more candidates are incentivized, is that a word, to vote, to run, because it's not going to be a smear campaign that leads nowhere. And they want to get their ideas out rather than the personalities. So, thank you. That's perfect. Okay. I want to talk about some of the common questions that we get. I'm sorry, I know you're behind the pole, but I know you're there. Okay. Some of the common myths or misunderstandings about ranked choice voting that I think are important to mention. One is people say it sounds really complicated, and it isn't. You know, if you've ever had to decide with a group where to go for dinner, you know that it can get complicated, but with ranked choice voting, you could have a choice that most people would be happy with, right? We all know how to do that. Even little kids know how to do that. So clicking on your ballot, first choice, second choice, third choice, that's easy. Okay. It doesn't give the advantage to the two major parties. It doesn't give the advantage to the smaller parties. It doesn't give the advantage to independent or non-affiliated. It provides an advantage to all of the above. Everybody wins with ranked choice voting, and especially the voter, because then we get representation that we really want. I don't know what's going on over there, but it looks like a lot of fun. So here's a big one. Ranked choice voting actually has been proven to bring more voters to the polls. It makes sense. We have heard people say, I'm not even going to vote because I don't like the two major candidates and nobody else has a chance. Or they say, you know, it's just a waste of time. With ranked choice voting, people understand that their voice will really count and really count for something. So they are much more likely to vote. We also know that ranked choice voting is not new. So people say, oh, that's a new thing. No, not at all. It's hardly a new thing. Ranked choice voting has been used around the world for more than 100 years. It's catching on very quickly. And there's a map. We have that map. I think it's on slide number, where did it go? Have we got it? Okay, that's all right. 22, yeah, there it is. So you can see that over 60 jurisdictions just in this country alone are already using ranked choice voting. And 2 states, that would be Maine and Alaska, use it statewide. In all the others, it's used for general elections or for primaries or other municipal elections. So this was in 2020. I think the map is growing. I sometimes have a hard time keeping up with it because when you read the paper, you'll find more and more places are adopting ranked choice voting. So and it's one of the reasons too that we chose ranked choice voting. There are other methods, of alternative methods, and Diane's going to talk about them. You've heard about star voting or other kinds of voting, which she will explain to you. This one seems to be the one that has the most appeal, and for good reason, which she'll explain. So it's something that we're riding on a wave here that's growing very fast. So there was one other thing that I wanted to make sure that you knew that, and as you can see, North Carolina is not on the map, right? And in fact, in North Carolina, for reasons that we can talk about when we have the Q&A, if you're interested, we did have ranked choice voting. And it was through a pilot project. It worked very well. The people who used it really liked it. But it was a limited pilot experiment. And the legislature chose not to extend it when the pilot program sunsetted. there were reasons for that. Unfortunately, what happened was that the election boards were not yet equipped to handle it and found it difficult, but that's all changed now. Most of the counties in our state have the machines that are equipped for it. The software and the hardware is available. In fact, we're lucky that here in North Carolina, there is an organization, a national organization called the Ranked Choice Voting Resource Center, and they give to any municipality that wants to use it the free software. So it can be instituted fairly quickly. So you've heard about the benefits. You've heard about some of the myths surrounding it that are very easy to explain and to overcome. So what we want to do in our ranked choice voting work is to, first of all, educate everybody to these facts, and they are facts, and we have a very wonderful research team that provides us with the statistics and so on, so that we know what's happening there. So we're working to make sure that people understand it. We'd like to give you an opportunity, and we can give you a link, we will at the end, where you can actually try it for yourself if you want to. There's a national organization called Fair Vote, and that's the organization that Diane is going to be representing tonight, in addition to her work with us here in North Carolina. We're just so lucky to have her. But there is an opportunity for you to try ranked choice voting online. So I'm going to stop, I think, John, and give you a chance to hear what Diane has to say, because there was, I understand from Travis, an interest among you on knowing about some of these other alternative ways of voting. So she will explain those and why we feel at Better Ballot that ranked choice voting is really the way to go. I hope that this explanation will make you pick up those bumper stickers that we gave you and actually, put them on your car, because because we don't have it here in North Carolina, the legislative support to bring ranked choice voting here, and we want to be able to show people that the people want it. And to me, democracy is about what the people want, not what the parties want, and so we'd have to demonstrate that there's a groundswell of support for it. We're going to ask a couple of things of you. One is to use those bumper stickers if you agree that we do need it here. And the other thing is to get your name onto our website so that we can demonstrate to the legislators, and this is not asking them for a specific form of ranked choice voting at this time, but just to say that the people want this. And if you're going to get our votes to represent us in that legislature here on Jones Street, then it's about time you started doing what the people want. So that's what we're about. I haven't said this yet, we're totally nonpartisan. Okay, we know that ranked choice voting benefits all parties and independent voters equally. And independent voters, by the way, are the largest voting bloc in North Carolina right now. There are more people unaffiliated than either with the Democratic or the Republican Party. So that's an important thing to keep in mind, that the people are looking for a different model, and we think we've got it. So there you go.
Thank you so much. So who's down for ranked choice voting so far? Sounds great to me. So next we're going to have Diane Silver. She's going to Zoom with us from Asheville, North Carolina. So once she's up and running, she's going to tell us her perspective. And here we go.
Okay. I haven't been able to hear what's been going on, so I assume Vicki did her presentation. Oh, nice. Okay, and how many folks do we have this evening? Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this, and I'm sorry that I couldn't be there with everybody in person. So, yeah, we're gonna do the screen here. Get the presentation up. Thank you so much for handling the technology side. Yeah, so I was asked by the organizers of this event to specifically address what the differences are between ranked choice voting, approval voting, and star voting. So, so that's what I'm going to talk about. So if you go to the next slide. I'm just going to dive right in the interest of time. And the first thing that I really want to emphasize is that approval voting and star voting and score voting, these other methods, are all, you know, really interesting and clever ideas. And I don't want this to come across as, you know, like an attack or a confrontational kind of thing. I think that they have lots of merit in some contexts. They you know, are a good tool for some decision making. And so I just want to sort of preface with that I hope that folks who agree that plurality voting, the way we vote now, is not great, and we need to do something better. You know, my hope is that we can all be on the same team pulling for reform. Approval voting, as you see here, is a method where the idea is you can vote for as many candidates as you want. You're saying, I approve of these ones. In this ballot, you know, maybe you approve of John Doe and Elaine and Dave, and so you would vote for those three. And the candidate who gets the highest number of votes wins, and that's it. And the idea behind it is, as it says, kind of like, I think lots of candidates are just fine. I'd be happy with any one of them. And the aim is to elect candidates who would have broad appeal in that way. It's currently used in 2 locations. In Fargo, North Dakota, they used it in 2021, I think. And in St. Louis, they did a 2-round system where the first round was approval voting, and then they had a top 2 runoff. So that's what it is. That's how it works. But if you'll advance to the next slide. I'm sort of following in 2 places here. Yeah. So this is kind of a comparison of ranked choice voting and approval voting. And to me, the big problem, that like the unfortunate weakness for approval voting is it assumes that all of the candidates who you would approve of, that you like them equally. Your vote counts equally for whoever you choose. So if we're having this vote for favorite candy, you know, for me, I really like M&M's best. I'm a chocolate lover, and so my top 2 favorites are the M&M's and the Snickers. And you know, I like candy, so I'm okay with Skittles and Starburst, but I really like chocolate better. And within the chocolate world, I really like M&Ms because they're easy to eat out of the bag and whatever my reasons are. So there's my ranking for the chocolate. Now, if I'm doing approval voting, my ballot looks like the one on the right, and I have a lot less choice. I have a lot less input, and I'm kind of left with this dilemma, like, do I really want to vote for the Skittles when they're my 3rd choice? That's giving as much preference to Skittles as to M&Ms. And the truth is, I really like M&Ms a lot more than I like Skittles. And so that's the big problem in my mind with approval voting for public elections. For a situation for some decision making, like agreeing on a movie or agreeing on a restaurant to go to. Decision making where either you really don't have a preference, like voters really are willing to say, any of these would be perfectly fine with me. Approval voting would be a really good tool. Or if you have a situation where people are inclined to be accommodating, where they might feel like, well, you know, I really want movie A instead of movie B, but I don't care that much, and in order to make other people happy, I'm willing to say I would be good with either one. In that kind of a situation, approval voting would be terrific. But I think that in political elections, I think people really do have a preference of one candidate more than another. I would invite you to think about your own preferences. Think about the current field in the Republican primary that's in the news these days, and think about who those individuals are. And there's probably some of them who you would feel like you could be okay with, but the question is, are you really equally okay with all of them? So think about that in your own mind. If we can go to the next slide. Next slide. Is it going? I can't tell if I'm frozen or... Uh-oh. Technical difficulties. Please stand by. Well, I'll kind of keep talking and hope that you can bring the slides back up and, you know, sort of catch up with me. Another challenge that we have with approval voting is that because you're voting for more than one candidate in any round of tallying, if you go ahead and vote for a second choice, you know, saying, well, you know, I really want candidate A, but I'd also be okay with candidate B, and you vote and you approve them as well, that vote can actually help candidate B overcome candidate A. You know, it's like if all of the A voters are also okay with B and they vote for both of them, but if all of the B supporters, people who really like B better, they say, well, we might be okay with A, but we're not going to vote for them, then B will have more votes than A, and B will win. And so the A voters, there's a strategic thing that starts to happen, which is A voters recognize, well, I don't know that everybody else is going to vote for, you know, all of the ones that they might approve of, so maybe I better not either. So when you vote for just one, it's called bullet voting. And so this is one of the challenges with approval voting, is it incentivizes voters to do that. It kind of devolves back into just vote for one, because there's this strategic dilemma of, do I trust other voters to also vote for all of the ones they approve of or not? And so it becomes this strategic dilemma in your mind, and I feel like that's not good for voters. What we really want is for voters to be able to just vote honestly. And so with ranked choice voting, when you rank other candidates, when you rank a second choice or a third choice, that means absolutely nothing if your first choice is still in the game. Every round of tallying, every vote counts for one candidate and one candidate only. It's your highest ranked candidate who's still in the race. So if your first choice hasn't been eliminated, your vote continues to count for only your first choice in subsequent rounds of tallying. So you can go ahead and rank a second choice and a third choice and a fourth choice, and that only gets looked at, that only counts for anything if your higher choices have been eliminated. And so there's no incentive to not rank them. You might as well give as much input as possible, and it rewards the voter for voting honestly. And that's what we want. We want the strategy, the best strategy, to be to just vote honestly, that you don't have to think about it too much. Next slide, please. And this has kind of been proven, this is borne out in the two times that approval voting has been used. We saw these quotes in the media in Fargo when they used it. The mayor, he was announcing his reelection campaign, and he actually said, I would probably bet that every candidate says, just vote for me, because by voting for a second choice, you're helping somebody else, maybe win instead. And this other candidate, Shannon Rohr, said the problem is the more candidates you vote for, the more it dilutes the impact of your vote. And so approval voting devolves back into plurality voting. Next slide, please. So these are the two cities where approval voting is used, St. Louis and Fargo. So we don't have a lot of data on how it works in the real world. We only have those two examples. Ranked choice voting, on the other hand, is used in, as Vicki said, lots of jurisdictions across the country. It's been in use for over 100 years in Australia and Ireland. It's been in use for nearly 20 years in a bunch of places in the United States. And so we have nearly 20 years worth of modern data on how ranked choice voting works in order to do some comparisons. Next slide, please. And so what we found is that in St. Louis, when they used it in 2021, the voters approved of an average of a little more than one candidate. Lots and lots and lots of ballots had only one, and a few had more than one. There were 7 candidates in this city council race, but the average number of votes on a ballot was 1.1 to 1.4. In Fargo, when they used it, 60% of voters, when we crunched the numbers, selected only one candidate out of a field of 7 for mayor. Okay, so what we're seeing from those examples are that the voters are not using the approval ballot. They have the opportunity to vote for more than one, but they don't, because voters are not stupid. Voters are savvy, and voters will do anything that will help their favorite candidate win. Voters are very strategic in the way they use their ballot. With ranked choice voting, on the other hand, over time, we have found that on average, 71% of voters rank multiple candidates, and 73% have the winner in their top 3 choices. And what that says to me is that winners are not just winning by a hair. It's not like, okay, you got 51% of the vote, so 51% of the voters are happy and the other 49% are unhappy. When 73% have the winner in their top 3 choices, the psychology feels like, well, I'm pretty okay with that. Maybe I didn't get my first choice, but I got my second choice, I got my third choice. I didn't get stuck with the one I really hate. And so a 73% satisfaction rate means that the people in office have a much stronger mandate to govern. And it is better for all of us when the promises that get made can actually be carried out, because there's not this opposition throughout the term of office. We also find that the ballot error rate is comparable to choose one. So any notions of, oh my God, I don't know if voters can understand this or do it or whatever, the data shows absolutely unequivocally that voters understand ranked choice voting. Casting a ranked ballot is easy. They like it. They want to do it again. Next slide, please. The other challenge that we saw in St. Louis, they realized that they weren't confident that the approval method was going to elect a winner with broad support in just one round, and so they used a two-round system where they kind of used approval voting to narrow the field, to weed out a larger field, and then they did a top 2 runoff. But the problem is that turnout is the highest in the general election, like by 30% in this particular election. And so the voters were presented with only 2 choices in the election when turnout was the highest. And so that's kind of defeating the whole purpose of giving voters more choice and more voice. With ranked choice voting, we can get the runoffs done with these instant runoffs. You don't have to come back to the polls a second time where the turnout is either lower during a a primary or a preliminary round where people are they're not as engaged, they're not paying attention the way they do in November, or you have round one in November and then you have a runoff, I don't know, 6 weeks later, and people are like, it's Christmas, we're still voting, really? And participation drops off. And so having to do it in 2 rounds isn't great either, but that's what they did in St. Louis. Next round slide, please. The other thing that we found in the St. Louis election was that the voters in majority white wards were more likely to cast multiple votes than voters in majority black wards. And so that sort of suggests that white voters had kind of a larger say. They had more input in determining who the 2 finalists were going to be than black voters did. With ranked choice voting, we've found that if there's a difference, sometimes there is and sometimes there isn't, but we've actually found that black voters engage more with the ranked ballot than white voters. And we think that's because leaders in their communities are doing a lot of education and outreach and educating them on how to, on the power of the ranked ballot and encouraging them to rank lots of candidates because they don't want vote splitting. Next slide, please. The other challenge with approval voting is that approval is kind of nebulous. And so not every voter interprets approval the same way. And so you might have a situation where like some voters are kind of tougher graders than other voters. Some people might feel like, well, you know, I'm kind of okay with that one, so I'll approve them as well. And another voter might say, I am only okay, you know, they have to meet all of these criteria before I'm going to be, you know, sufficiently satisfied that I will approve of them and vote for them. And so what approval means to voter A is different than voter B. And so some are having more input than others. That's by choice, but it's not comparing apples to apples. Whereas with ranked choice voting, it's much more standardized. I feel like, you know, everybody has kind of the same idea of what first choice, second choice, third choice means. And people, you know, they may have different levels of and different criteria of how they determine that, but my first choice is my first choice, your first choice is your first choice. They carry equal weight. And so I feel like that is an important benefit of ranked choice voting. With ranked choice voting, it's less susceptible to strategic voting. And the other thing is approval voting is actually not a majority method. It doesn't guarantee that the winner is going to win by majority. And we've seen that happen in colleges. There are a number of universities who tried using approval voting, and they ended up abandoning it because what happened is it devolved back into plurality voting. There was so much bullet voting, most of the ballots only had one vote, and the winner, whoever has the most votes, was winning only by plurality. They had less than 50% of the vote. So it didn't accomplish what they were hoping it was going to accomplish. With ranked choice voting, it's a majority system by design. And so winners have to have a strong base of support to stay in the game, to not get eliminated. And then they also have to have breadth of support in order to get over the top. Okay, next slide, please. I have 5 minutes, so I got to go really fast. It's also possible that approval voting violates the one person, one vote legal standard, whereas ranked choice voting has actually been taken to court by opponents who were hoping to cut it down and has survived every legal challenge that's been brought against it. Next slide, please. Score voting. So that was approval voting. Different methods. Score voting is kind of like a Yelp review. It's where you give points to different candidates on a 1 to 5 scale, and then they add up all the points, and whoever has the most points wins. Next slide, please. The problem with score voting, a lot of the challenges are the same as with approval voting. First of all, if you score multiple candidates, you're helping your second or third choice potentially overcome your first choice. And so it incentivizes people to only vote for one. And it's back to that whole strategic voting problem. And ranked choice voting doesn't do that. Next slide, please. Bullet voting, I really wanted to say this because you all are the Libertarian Party, a third party, and bullet voting masks the level of where support is coming from. So, when the candidate wins, if voters decide in plurality voting, the way we vote now, if voters say, well, I'm a libertarian and I really would like to vote for the libertarian, but I'm not confident they're really going to win, and I don't want to, quote unquote, waste my vote, so I'm going to not vote for the one I really like, and I'll vote for my second choice instead. That second choice candidate doesn't know how many libertarians did that. Whereas with ranked choice voting, we have the cast vote records that capture where that support is coming from, and it gives that party, the third party, more power and more influence in influencing the agenda. They can go to that candidate and say, you won because of our second choice votes. And so there's a lot more influence that the party can wield, even if they don't win the office, because of the information we have in the cast vote record. Okay, next slide, please. Score voting doesn't necessarily prevent that vote splitting between similar constituencies, and it might not elect a majority winner, whereas ranked choice voting does. Next slide, please. And again, there's a lot of subjectivity. What 5 points means to one person might be different than what 5 points means to somebody else. Whereas with ranked choice voting, the rankings all mean the same thing across the board. Next slide. I'm really running through this because we're short on time. So that's score voting. The truth is, nobody uses score voting. Score voting is not used in any elections, like anywhere. Star voting is an adaptation of score voting. They took score voting, and it's an acronym. It stands for score, then automatic runoff. So it's a 2-round system, and it's a combination of 2 kinds, and it was developed because of the problem that score voting has of incentivizing bullet voting. There's that incentive to only vote for one, and so people said, okay, well, how about if we have a top 2 runoff? Then people will be more incentivized to go ahead and score more than one. So they developed this idea. Next slide, please. The problem is this. If you have more than 5 candidates, like you only have 5 points to work with. And so in a crowded field, like for example, in the Republican primary field right now, there are, I think, 7 or 9 candidates on stage in Milwaukee this evening. So if you were trying to score all of them, you run out of points. There's only a 1 to 5. So some of them you're going to have to score them the same. Well, what happens if those 2 are the ones who make it to the runoff? So in this example, you can see how the voter scored these candidates, and DeAndre and Caitlin both were given 4 points. This voter felt kind of the same about them, give them the same. When it comes to the final choice, that voter has no voice. Do they really feel absolutely 100% equal between DeAndre and Caitlin? Or do they maybe prefer one over the other, but they had to score 2 candidates with the same score because that's what score voting forces you to do. And so their ballot doesn't count at all in the runoff round, because the election administrators can't distinguish which candidate they prefer more. So their ballot gets thrown away. And so that's a big problem with star voting, is that a lot of ballots get disqualified in that final round because you can't tell what the voter wanted. Next slide, please. Star voting, same as with score and with approval, a vote for a backup choice can actually help them win over your favorite, and so there's that incentive to vote for one. It's the same problem as the others that I talked about. So next slide, please. And there's no evidence with any of these methods that it does anything to help improve representation for traditionally underrepresented groups. It may not elect a majority preferred candidate. It doesn't necessarily prevent the vote splitting between similar constituencies, which then hands the win to the party you don't want. And it's on shaky legal ground, because with all of these systems, you actually are casting a vote for more than one candidate in a given round of voting. In ranked choice voting, it's multiple rounds of voting. It's just these instant runoffs are just like going and having a physical runoff where you only vote for one candidate in any particular runoff. One person, one vote. And I guarantee you that the opponents, people who are enjoying power with plurality voting and are trying to prevent any kind of reform, they're going to bring that to court. And it's unlikely, well, it's shaky. Whereas ranked choice voting has already been through that gauntlet and has survived every single court case that's been brought and is on very strong legal ground. Okay, next slide, please. So I want to conclude. I'm running a little long. I'm almost done, I promise. There is no voting method out there that's perfect. And STAR advocates and approval advocates and other folks will hit you with arguments with what's wrong with ranked choice voting. And it is possible that they can come up with a scenario where there's some thing where if the voter would have done X instead of Y, it would have been better for them, and so, you know, it doesn't work. What I want to say here is, if there was a perfect method, we would have found it by now and we wouldn't be having all these conversations. Every method has some weakness, and so to me, what we have to do is decide, well, which one is the best, not perfect method? And therefore, we should have some criteria. And to me, those criteria are which one has the weaknesses, whatever they are, happen as rarely as possible, very infrequently, like 90-something% of the time, it works great. Every now and then, maybe this weakness rears its ugly head. And how easy are the weaknesses to exploit? And when you do that analysis, the problems with approval voting and with SCORE and with STAR happen all the time. And the weaknesses that opponents will cite about ranked choice voting happen in these very rare instances where you've like manipulated the numbers in a spreadsheet and said, if candidate A gets 32% and candidate B gets 34% and candidate C, whatever, and they can come up with a narrative, then it would have been better for these voters to do this instead of that. Those stars aligning in that way is very, very rare, number one. And number two, you only know that that happened in hindsight. You don't know at the time that you're voting that that's what's going to happen. And those scenarios are basically saying that in a very, very close election where things are a three-way race, neck and neck, it would be better for one of those candidates to drop out and tell all their voters to go support somebody else. No candidate is going to do that. No campaign manager is going to advise their client when it's at 33% versus 32% that they should give up and drop out. And so the ability for voters to exploit that scenario is fake. It's a fake argument. And that's why I think that ranked choice voting is the best method out there. What makes it imperfect is very rare and very hard to exploit. The best strategy is to just vote honestly. And that's what we want for voters. We want it to be simple and straightforward to evaluate the candidates and choose the ones you like. Next slide, please. So I've got this summary of all the benefits of ranked choice voting, how ranked choice voting can transform elections, but I think we've been through it a lot. Vicky summarized it. More choice, better representation, no more vote splitting, majority winners, more civilized campaigns that are issue-oriented, broader engagement with the voters. I've got 2 more slides and then I'm done. How does it work in practice? Ooh, blank? Maybe hit the next slide, maybe it'll come up. Yeah. Number 1, voters like ranked choice voting and they use the rankings. Next, click it again. It encourages sincere voting, which is what I just talked about. Click it again. And it elects winners with broad support. Again, you have to have a lot of first choice support, but you also have to have a lot of second and third choice support. And so it's not just a slim majority that feels good about the outcome, but 73% feel pretty good about what happened. And that's going to do a lot to help curtail this situation we're in right now of dissatisfaction with the outcome. This whole fraud, claims of fraud and lawsuits and everything is based on a lot of people being dissatisfied with the outcome. When 70% of voters are pretty okay with the outcome, we're going to have a lot less of that dissent, and we can move on with governing and problem solving. Next slide, please. It improves the tone of campaigns, and it improves representation. New York City has the most diverse city council in history since they started using ranked choice voting. More women are running and winning. More people of color are running and winning, and that kind of representation is good for our society. I think I'm done. Next. Yep, I think it was just the questions slide. Okay, thank you so much
true,
for this
honest,
opportunity.
transparent.
The Zoom call is muted, so I can't hear anything from your end. So if people have questions, I don't know how you want to handle that.
Q&A later. So yeah, true, honest, transparent voting. I think that's all. I think we all want that, and that's what we're pushing for. And less backbiting and less division. You vote for you rank your candidates in order of preference. Sounds great to me. So next, I'm going to have one of my friends, Patrick Newton, with the Forward Party, and they are pushing for ballot access in North Carolina right now. So, like I said, anything to disrupt the Uniparty, sign me up. I'm in. Anything to disrupt the duopoly, sign me up. The Demopublicans and the Republicrats, they got something coming, man, because we're gonna challenge the two-party system, and so that is what Patrick's doing, and so it's my honor to introduce Patrick Newton from the Forward Party.
Thank you, Travis. It's awesome. So glad to be here. Thank you, everybody. So yes, I am the vice chair of the North Carolina Forward Party. We formed a while back. We are actually a party. We just don't have ballot access, as you pointed out. So we do have clipboards. We're going to ask if any of you could sign. You're simply stating you're okay with another party having candidates on the ballot. And I think most of the people in this room, that's something that everybody would support. So we appreciate that. The party is founded by Andrew Yang and Christy Todd Whitman, a big Republican and Democrat. And what we're trying to focus on is things that bring people together. So ranked choice voting for us is one of the pillars of our party. Term limits, open primaries, ranked choice voting, things that we can all agree on, right? We could yell and scream at each other about abortion or gun control or a lot of difficult emotional issues, but it's exhausting and it's challenging, right? And it takes a lot of energy, and we haven't made much progress on any of them, frankly. So things like ranked choice voting, we believe is something people can actually come together on and agree and get done. So I don't think I need to tell you the benefits of ranked choice voting. I think that's been covered very well tonight. If anybody in this room doesn't understand how great it is and that we need it, then you clearly haven't been paying attention. But I think I speak for our whole party when we support it, and we want to see it happen. So tonight, actually, I have an announcement that I'll save for a second. It involves an active libertarian, so I know you guys will be happy to hear that. But before that, I have something else I wanted to share. We have our first candidate in the state, Victoria Masika. She is a school teacher in Hillsborough. She's running what we call aligned with the Forward Party. So she's an independent, which I think a lot of people in this room like independence, right? Stop the duopoly. She's running as what we would call a forward independent. So she's aligned with our ideals. She's signed a candidate pledge saying she believes in things like ranked choice voting. So I called her on the way over here, and we're always talking strategy and how she's running for town commissioner, by the way, in Hillsborough. And I told her, I said, I'm going to an event where there's going to be a lot of people that all agree ranked choice voting is important and needs to happen. And I've talked with Better Ballot before and the Libertarians on this topic. The question for me has always been, how do we get this done, right? So if we all, contact the General Assembly, and I'm signed up on your website, by the way, and I hope everyone in the room is, because we need to tell them how important this is. But let's face it, the General Assembly, it's not in their best interest for us to have better representation, right? So they might not really go out of their way to make ranked choice voting happen. I think we've got to find a way to do it locally. I think we need to find a community that can vote to get the law to have ranked choice voting. That'll need to get approved by the General Assembly, and again, that's where it's all tied together. But my point is, Victoria agreed on the ride over here. She's going to make it part of her platform that if she's elected, she's going to fight to have ranked choice voting in Hillsborough, North Carolina. So I think that's super exciting. And we'll share her website and information. I know she'd love to have any support that any of you can provide. But I think if we can all get behind candidates that want to make this happen, that'll be really exciting for us. The other item that I wanted to share, though, I mentioned Victoria. She was our first candidate to sign the pledge. We actually have our second, Rob Yates, who's a Libertarian. He's running for mayor of Charlotte, and he's going to run as a forward Libertarian. So we're super excited to have Rob on the ballot as well. So I know we were pressed a little bit for time, so I don't want to take too much of your time tonight. Any questions about the Forward Party, the work we're doing? Anything anybody wants to know while I'm here? Well, if you think of something, I'll be right over here. Again, we have our signature sheet, so if you could take a moment and sign that, we'd appreciate it. Also on our website, you can download the sheet. We call it our Me+3. So we ask you to sign it, maybe get a couple of friends to sign it with you. You can mail it back. We'll turn it into the Board of Elections. So thanks very much for your, do we have a question?
Real quick, what's the cutoff date for you getting enough signatures for the 2024?
Yeah, so you guys have more experience with this than we do, and we look what the Green Party went through last year. It's kind of self-imposed, but by the end of the year, we really need to see some numbers growing rapidly, because the magic number is about 14,000, which makes us think we need about 25 to survive any challenges and so forth, and that's all going to happen, I think it's mid-March. But to get it submitted, get it challenged, fight whatever lawsuits we might face, we would like to really see significant numbers by the end of the year. So hopefully with your guys' help, we can get there. Thank you.
So I will say, if you're so inclined, please sign the petition for ballot access for Forward Party. And there's another petition going around for better ballot access, or for better ballot North Carolina for ranked choice voting in North Carolina. So please, I would encourage you to sign both. We want as much competition as possible because it creates better outcomes. If you disagree with that, you disagree with capitalism. So that's on you. So, there you go. Please sign it. I encourage you to sign it. Well, we have a little surprise for you tonight. We have a special guest that we've had extensive conversations with him. I have personally. It's a doctor from Hickory, North Carolina, and he has seen some things, and I'm not going to share those stories. I'll let him share what he wants to share, but I'm going to let his wife come up and introduce him because she personally requested to introduce him. And so it is my pleasure to welcome Dr. Barrett and his wife, Lauren. And they are from Hickory, North Carolina. They drove a long way here, so please introduce yourself. And they also have some handout materials for you, so please grab it. And Lauren, would you like to take over? I would. All right, thank you so much for coming, by the way.
Thank you, Jeremy, and thank you for having us. All right. If you saw my husband and I whispering back and forth, it's because we were arguing about what we could say and what we couldn't say. So we have very differing opinions on what we should actually talk about tonight. The there's words I shouldn't use that I'm about to say. Words like vaccines, words like mandates, words like woke, words like awake, words like Wake County, which I'm from. Yeah, that's the thing that bothers me the most, is not being able to look people in the eye and saying, "Can we talk about it yet? Like, can we say the words yet? Can we actually say the word and not feel like we're going to get castrated?" Okay. Now, I'm from Memphis, Tennessee, so I've never been to Wake County before. So on our 3-hour drive here, I was like, "Where are we going, hun?" And Wake County. And I was like, "Oh, okay, let's look at this." So I was looking up, and I didn't know if, well, I found out a couple things. One, that the legislative leader, Governor Roy Cooper, I don't even know if he's Democrat or Republican. I don't care. What I do know is he was fined because he accepted illegal campaign contributions from Pfizer. I don't. I'm kidding. I'll keep it quick, I promise. I also noticed that there's. Okay, I also noticed that there's 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Pfizer buildings, headquarters, and plants, including the Pfizer Poultry Health Division, which is now permanently closed, in and around Wake County. And these are just things that give me more questions than answers. Right before this pandemic, around 2018, my husband and I were on a walk, and I just asked too many questions, and I said, "Hun, how come we get flu vaccine?" I don't get it, but how come they make flu vaccines, but they don't make cold vaccines? And we're walking, and he's like, "Well, hun, in medical school, we learned that cold vaccines are a kind of virus called a coronavirus, and they mutate too fast to make a vaccine." We're just, "Well, oh, that's interesting, hun." And we're walking and walking. And then the next year, this coronavirus hits, and they talk about a vaccine, and we're walking, and I'm like, "Hun, didn't you tell me last year that it's impossible to make?" So you can see where this is going. I live with a doctor whose father actually passed away, vaxxed, double boosted from coronavirus, and who used to work for the CDC. And I know I'm probably losing some people here, but I didn't find these things out online. I found them out from scientists whose names I won't name, but these were private conversations with people. These weren't propaganda one way or another. But what was happening was my husband and I were sitting on the sofa, and we decided that we would choose not to vaccinate our children. We would go back and forth because some people chose to vaccinate because they have a gift of charity. And they vaccinated because they were charitable toward their children, toward their grandparents, toward their parents. They have a gift of virtue. Some people chose not to vaccinate because they had a gift of virtue. Each person makes decisions based on the people they meet, the places they go, yada, yada, yada. The point was we chose not to give it to our children. So we'd have these discussions, and I would say, "Well, do your patients know what we know?" "No, I'm not allowed to tell them." "You're not allowed to tell them, so we're not going to give it to our children, but you're not allowed to tell them why we're not giving it to our children?" This was hard. This was very hard. We prayed, we argued. Not that he was for it, but this man would come home shaking every night, coming home from work shaking, because they said, "Leave your personal values at home." They were getting $50 for every time they even said, "Would you like this shot?" Now, I applaud you if you got this shot because you're doing it out of the goodness of your heart. I applaud you for that. But it's the mandate. It's the not letting a medical professional speak after treating children for 24 years and going to medical school and not letting him speak on what he learned. It was hard, and it still is hard. We let go of our income, which was a very good income. He took no incentive. He said, I don't want the money, it's blood money. You keep it. Do not check the code on the insurance. They check a box, so they get that $50 just for saying, gee, we have to ask, but would you like the vaccine? We just have to ask. They don't have to ask. They get money for asking. Just saying. My point is, we gave up our salary. It's hard to get the word out when you're scared that your husband's gonna lose his license. But we had to make a choice. And just as you went with your conscience to vaccinate or to not vaccinate, we had to go with our conscience to fully inform parents about things that we learned and people we had spoken to. So with that, I'm going to introduce my hero, Dr. Mark Barrett.
So that'll be hard to follow. So she's right, and sorry, thank you. I did this morning with a Rotary Club meeting, so I should know better. So yeah, we're about freedom of choice, and pediatrics is at the very top of the list with mandating vaccines. If you don't have your own kids, when you're going to have them soon, you'll find out. It's hard to find a pediatrician where the first question you're asked is not going to be, so are you going to get all the vaccines, or is your child fully vaccinated? And that's, especially over the last 3 years, that's turned a lot of people off. And parents should have the choice, if they're given full informed consent about these vaccines, whether they want to proceed with them or not. They shouldn't be mandated to do so just because a three-letter organization tells you you have to do that, to do this. So there's been a lot of patients that have been either just not going to the doctor, or they go to some alternative doctor, or they'll go to somewhere where someone's going to tell them we're not going to force you to vaccinate, only to find out that that's not always the case after a few visits, because when you're in a group practice, you have to be on the same page, what we call a group think. There's 5, 10, 15 partners. If you're not all on the same page, then eventually somebody's the odd man out or the odd woman out. And so after seeing some vaccine injuries from the COVID shot, I saw myocarditis, two healthy teenagers. It's heart inflammation, feels like you're having a heart attack. It's like having a mild heart attack. 2 patients, 7 days after their COVID shot. And I had not seen a natural case of myocarditis caused by other viruses in my career. So that was unusual for me, and it was confirmed by the emergency room and the cardiologist that it was vaccine related. So trying to talk to my former partners about this, basically I got ridiculed. I had a whole talk, kind of like what we're doing here now, but on a piece of paper, because we had a shorter meeting talking about things, and I was interrupted and say, quite frankly, that looks like a Twitter post. This sounds like a Twitter post. Because I had VAERS reports, I had the myocarditis cases and everything, and that was the struggle that I went through with that. And you know, I had a lot of parents asking me to split up vaccines because of a previous child that had an issue with really sick on the day or two after their shots, and out of an abundance of caution wanted to maybe hold off or just delay these shots in our younger child this time, and I was not allowed to do that either. So, and it reached a point where I just couldn't do that, go against my conscience, and what God's will was for us was to leave and to start our own solo practice, which is what we're doing, in order to give the parents freedom of choice. As long as they get in full informed consent, we're practicing medical freedom. We're not mandating any vaccines or any particular treatments. We have a cash-based membership practice Sometimes you hear the term concierge medicine. You see that a lot. Membership-based. They would get 24/7 access to my cell phone any time of day or night. It's kind of old school, unlimited visits, and started out really slow, but it was feel like the word is starting to get out a lot more in our area. But I had patients signed up. Even from Chapel Hill, I've had patients sign up to come all the way to Denver to see me, in Denver, North Carolina, by the way. So that's about 3 hours. So the insurance companies are the ones giving physicians incentives to give these vaccines. You document that you had the discussion, you put in a code at the bottom and check the box, and then you get a higher kickback from the insurance company for reimbursements. It's happened across the board from multiple insurance companies, and I think even Medicaid. So I wasn't going to have any part of that. That's not good health care. That's being incentivized. And it's like the vaccine. If the COVID shot's working so well, why are they having to give away free Dunkin' Donuts and hamburgers and French fries for you to go get it? But it's not. I'm not vaccine shaming at all, because everyone, like my wife said, made the best decision for themselves and their bodies and their families based on the information that they were presented. So, but for me, I was not going to be forcing those things on babies down to the age of 6 months, because they're, for the most part, are healthy, and they get over it pretty quickly. So we're practicing. One second. We're practicing medical freedom, parent choice, no mandates in my practice. And so that's what we're doing. So that's all I got.
One, two. Well, you sound like Dr. Ron Paul, in my opinion, which is amazing. Medical freedom is an important discussion with the Libertarian Party. You own your body, you own yourself, you own what goes into your body, you have full consent, and nobody can violate your consent. You sound like Dr. Ron Paul to us, which I've felt like that since the day I met you. You remind me of Dr. Ron Paul, which is a huge accomplishment, and also a very high standard to set. So right now I want to open it up for any questions for anybody who spoke tonight. Dave's got a microphone as well. This is a Q&A session. I want you just to stay right there, Mark. And we're going to open it up for discussions. If you have any questions about his medical practice, on what he's seen and why he's decided to leave a traditional style medical practice to open his own medical freedom style office, which I commend you. I love it. I'm fairly certain that everyone in this room loves that, but we're going to open it up for Q&A right now. So here we go. We got one right here.
Yeah, I just have a question. So it sounds like, the COVID vaccine was kind of a turning point for you. What are your thoughts on the other childhood vaccines? Are there others that are you advising your patients not to take as well? And if so, why not?
I talk to them. Basically, the informed consent that most patients are getting in most traditional doctor's offices are the side effects are going to be you may have a low-grade fever, maybe flu-like symptoms, and a sore shoulder. Right. That for any vaccine, that's pretty much the informed consent that people are getting. For most of the vaccines, a lot of the kids do fine. But you talk to enough parents and you see enough kids saying, 10 days after this particular shot, my child quit talking, or there's been a lot of studies. RFK Jr. is kind of running on that sort of platform. He sort of, by default, sort of adopted a lot of that vaccine thing, and it's got kind of labeled as an anti-vaxxer. But there's some truth to what he's saying, and a lot of as we've learned during COVID, a lot of the literature, a lot of the peer-reviewed literature about the vaccines gets buried and gets not published because it doesn't benefit the pharmaceutical companies. So pharmaceutical companies are probably 50% or more of the financial backing for all these medical journals. So if it doesn't benefit them, they're going to probably skew the data. We saw a lot of that during this. But vaccines have different side effects for different people. Some people have a gene called MTHFR, can cause a lot of issues with some children, and all children aren't the same. Some kids have. I've heard of parents telling me their child has infantile spasms after 2 days after a shot. They have a seizure. They have a febrile seizure. They have, autism type features. So there's a lot of stuff out there. So we kind of let them know, there's potential for these side effects. And we also talk about, what are the risks of not getting vaccines, and what are the chances that you might actually get measles or polio and those kinds of things as well.
Test. Okay, we have another one.
Yeah, I had a question to come to me, and I just wanted to be sure to answer it while we're doing the Q&A, because it directly links to what you're talking about, the freedom to choose. And I wanted to make clear that in Better Ballot, North Carolina, we are not asking that ranked choice voting be mandated in the state. We ask that any municipality that wants to use it should have that option. And I think that's what it's really all about, that people should be free to choose.
Right, exactly.
I was just going to ask about that. Right now, the towns can't choose it because of why?
If a little town, Holly Springs or anywhere, wanted to use ranked choice voting in their municipal elections, they would be prohibited from doing so by the current laws on voting. All we're asking is for local options so that any town or city that chooses to use it would have the right to do that.
Yeah, and to clarify my question was more specifically about the parties. So like the Libertarian Party chooses its presidential candidate at convention. And so it would be inappropriate for the state or any body to determine how we choose our candidate. If we stuck with that, I'd actually like to see ranked choice voting for our LP presidential. But leave that to the side. In the general election, I completely agree that ranked choice voting is the way to go. And it's a Dillon rule state, as you know, so cities don't do what they want, which has pluses and minuses, I'll say. It really does. So thank you.
Do we have any more questions? We have one right here.
Yeah, this is Brad Hessel, Wake County Libertarian Party. I do have a ranked choice voting question, and I'd like to hear both from Vicki and Diane, kind of following up on what Vicki just said about allowing municipalities and counties, I guess, to make a choice. Does it, from a strategy point of view, it seems like it would be really hard to get the legislature to agree to use ranked choice voting for statewide elections like gubernatorial or even for North Carolina General Assembly. So does a strategy to focus on getting what you just suggested, a relaxation of the rule that, so that municipalities and localities can use it, that might be easier to get, in your opinion? That's my question, I guess. Is that the strategy?
That is a strategy. There are many strategies that we're looking into and talking to legislators who are in our camp, so to speak, to talk to them about what they feel would have the best chance of passing as a beginning. And Diane, you're back on the call. If we could hear from you, because you were heading the strategy committee. Is there anything that you want to report? But basically, yes, we're thinking that starting at the local level would be the way to go and work from there, because we're pretty sure that once people try it, they're going to want to use it in the other elections as well. Diane, please. Did you hear the question?
I would just add that I
Diane,
think
you have
that,
to unmute.
yep, can you hear me? I unmuted. Yes,
She can hear us. Not quite
I
sure why she can't
unmuted.
speak. Oh,
I
try again, Diane.
test.
All right, there you go.
Okay, yeah. I would just add that I think that municipalities, local government has always been the proving ground for new ideas. And so it makes a lot of sense to me that that is the appropriate place to start. And so, as Vicky said, we're just asking for the, blessing, the permission for municipalities to do it if they want to. I would also just add there are other strategies. If people think that this is a great idea, I personally do, we could, the state legislature, if they wanted, could choose to use it for federal offices. That wouldn't affect their own seats. Like, I get it that when you're in office, it's like, well, I won under the current rules. Why would I want to change the rules, that worked well for me? So I understand that thinking. And the interest in protecting, their own seat. But we could do it for federal offices, and that would be a start. And there could also be, adopting it for state offices, but not for some number of years, and so that might make it more palatable to current office holders and would give candidates, people who are thinking about running for state office in 5 years or something, the chance to wrap their head around it and really know what they're getting into, and that campaign strategy will be different. I think, so there's a lot of ways to go about it, but definitely the local level is the place to start, to get voters used to it, to get candidates used to it, to get election administrators used to it, and that's what we're asking for.
Your wait staff well. They're very good to us over here, so thank you so much to Tobacco Road. And that's it for the evening. Thank you for watching at the Libertarian Party of Wake County. Have a great evening.